So to kick things off, as we heard in Danny's presentation, and I definitely share this opinion, the most exciting part about AI is using AI to solve some of the biggest challenges and building applications. And in this specific panel, I wanted us to cover the topic of how can we actually use AI to solve some of the most interesting and challenging societal problems. So to open up the panel, I wanted first, if I didn't cover anything in the introduction, please introduce yourself quickly. And then the first question I wanted us to address is, what do you see are the most important challenges in your space and for the society in general? And how do you see AI being used today or should be used today to actually solve them? So yeah, we'll maybe go one by one.
Dmitry starts with the easy questions always. So maybe I'll just say a couple of words about myself before I answer this. Thank you for the intro. So my name is Yaron. I'm a physicist turned entrepreneur. I co-founded a company called Neutrino that invented a way to quantify how food affects people from a health perspective. That got acquired by Medtronic. It's the biggest medical device in the world. And after which I led the AI work for Medtronic. And today, an entrepreneur that works on a few companies. So back to Dmitry's question, I would say that, at least for me, I would say that the two biggest societal challenges that we have, the first one is probably climate change, or more broadly, the environmental crisis that has other aspects beyond climate change. I will go a little bit recursive here and say that I think that a second societal challenge that we're going to have is actually AI itself, potentially. Can get into the details as to why, but I think that we are seeing a speed of evolution and change that will be very difficult to adapt to and is going to interfere with every aspect of our lives. And in a sense, it's a little bit like, it might sound like an exaggeration, but we just invented nuclear energy or the nuclear bomb. But unlike these technologies, anyone can run them now from their living room, right? So it creates new types of challenges that we'll need to address. And regarding the second part, I do believe that AI could be used for all of those problems, potentially in different ways. It won't be the only tool that we'll have to use, but I do think it will have an important part in them. Very difficult to answer this in a short sentence, but I'll just say, as an example, for climate change specifically, climate change is not one single problem. It's really a multitude of probably 1,000 plus different problems. And a lot of them have to do with optimization. We're trying to do things in a more efficient way, which is really, when you think about it, what AI excels in. So I think it will be a very important part of the future in that sense.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks, of course, for the intro to answer your question of how to be a professor and run an AI company. Is you run the AI company, the AI does your professor job for you. Students, come up, then they come and work for your AI company. The circle is closed. Boom. Okay. Yeah. So I think I fully agree that the climate change aspect of our 21st century kind of crisis is a huge one. I'm actually deeply optimistic about the use of AI for this, not just from a perspective of optimization, but one thing that I think AI does much better than we all do is think multidimensionally. Like, I have a really, really hard time thinking in more than 4 dimensions. And I don't know, maybe some of you are better at this than I, but the fact that you can design algorithms that are not as limited in the dimensionality, I think is critical. So for things like fusion, where the problem lies in plasma instabilities, right, which we have a really, really hard time having a handle on, right? There's been demonstrated kind of excellence in using machine learning to suppress them, right? And generally, right, in chaos theory, for some reason, no one knows why, but you can have machine learned solutions to chaotic differential equations that predict beyond the kind of Lyapunov horizon of where you're supposed to be able to predict. So I think that therein lies the kind of the heart of the solution. The other thing the other real challenge, I would say, is the erosion of trust, right? I think, this is not just trust in institutions. This is also kind of interpersonal trust. We have seen that erode in the last, decades, really in a pretty steady way. So I don't know where the answer is there, but it's kind of intuitively, it also feels like that's a space where we're having kind of, in the world of informational overload, having artificial intelligence systems guide us is going to be a real value add.
So of course, going last, climate change is the obvious one and probably the most important problem, but just to show some diversity on the panel here, I guess I'll point out cyber security and infrastructure, I think, is a big one. Our society has become so dependent on using the internet and infrastructure associated with that. We here in Menlo Park had examples of this, multiple, unfortunately, examples in the last couple of months with the big rain and windstorms where the power was out for a while. And my husband didn't care at all about the fact that all our food in the refrigerator was going bad. It was the internet. I can't get on the internet. I can't do anything. I can't read my emails. I can't do my banking. And that was due to possibly to climate change, but certainly there are a lot of bad actors out there as well who are trying to specifically target our cyber infrastructure and having some success doing that. And that's going to be increasingly more of a challenge for us as more and more of what we do is moving online. But again, I think that's a place where we're already seeing that AI is making a difference. Very simple example, the or spam detection, phishing email detection, right? We've already got very sophisticated algorithms for doing that kind of thing. But there's a lot more really cool AI-based technology that's helping out with looking for intrusion detection, tracking the migration of different kind of viruses and how they're evolving as the attackers get more and more clever. There's some work going on here at SRI that's really interesting in terms of automatically upgrading the encryption software on machines so that it's less vulnerable to different kinds of attacks that are out there. So I think there's a huge potential for using AI to help with this problem, and we'll see many more interesting solutions to come.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, we'll use one just to avoid the AV confusion. One of the things that immediately comes to mind is when we talk, for example, about climate change and physics, those challenges are, you can formulate the problem fairly clearly and use AI and physics to solve those challenges. When we talk about, every one of you touched the security and social aspect of the AI impact, which for me is much, much more difficult to quantify. Trust, how do we deal with these situations, for example, with deep fakes? And the other aspect of this is employment and ability for people to find meaning and opportunities in life. So, for example, we at Pasio, we run a large data team of people worldwide collecting data. Right now, this entire job is becoming completely obsolete with generative models where the data can be generated. And there will be more and more and more examples of this. How do you think do you see AI as a net creator of jobs or a net destroyer of jobs? And if it is actually negative societally, how can we use AI to actually change this dynamic and actually create jobs instead of destroying them? Maybe let's go from Karen's side.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm an AI person, so of course I'm an AI optimist, and I really think that we're going to see there may be changes in the kind of jobs out there, but it's just astonishing to me to see the wave of creativity that's being unleashed by the advances with AI technology now. Like even people who aren't AI experts, you go to a dinner or a party or something, and you'll hear some people who have nothing to do with the field who all of a sudden are launching a spin-out company that's using ChatGPT because they're just seeing the huge potential for how that technology can be used in their vertical market to really transform what they're doing. So there definitely will be people, unfortunately, who lose their jobs as a result of this, because the technology can now do a lot of low-level entry type jobs, rote jobs where maybe we used to use people before, but now the systems can do it, that work for us. But it will just open up so many more opportunities that I think we'll see lots of interesting new jobs, many new job categories that, we never dreamed would have existed, like prompt writers. Like, who would have thought a few years ago you could make a living out of writing prompts? You can make a very lucrative living, at least right now, writing prompts. Maybe that job will disappear shortly too, though.
Yeah, so this is a great question. And it made me think of something. So when we just started with Lucinetic, back in 2021, we sort of thought, okay, what can we do that's going to be kind of interesting as a first, first problem to solve? And we figured it will write letters of recommendation, right? As a professor, I have to write like 250 of them per year or something. And so we thought, it'd be cool if you could, have, give a tool to faculty where they'll see some text and modify it, and then the model will read that back in and suggest, reasonable text that would follow up. And the response to that has been entirely bifurcated, right? It's been, thank you for getting my 250 times 3 hours back. And the other side is like, this makes me feel deeply uncomfortable. And that kind of second, response is also something that I see now resonating a lot more with the students. When I just had a long conversation with a sort of student group, and these are, Caltech students, so they're kind of plugged into the AI things, right? There's a lot of discomfort surrounding exactly this notion that as we transition, as we go forward into the future, what's going to happen? Like, did I spend the last 4 years getting a CS degree? Like, is that fully now taken care of by GPT-4? And of course, if you look at historical data, it's hard to see, for example, automation in the 70s, like wiping out jobs, right? It's hard to see mass unemployment that results from that. But what you can see is a lot of kind of societal discomfort with that need to adapt, right? People that having to change the way things, right? So I think that we'll see not so much unemployment, but we'll see, kind of a period of kind of economic shocks that comes from the unease of moving against the inertia.
Interesting. So I think that, first of all, whether AI would actually cause unemployment or not would very much depend on the speed at which it actually takes place. I do believe that maybe in the short to medium term, there could be that uneasiness that is being formed if professions are going to be basically switched or just completely disrupted by this new technology. Until just recently, AI has been pretty domain specific, and we're seeing how it's gradually becoming, actually maybe not gradually, quickly becoming less specific and can do wider things. But I also think that in a sense, AI can also create a lot of amazing opportunities if done properly and if used creatively. In my new company, I won't talk too much about it, but it's a company called Beehive. We're currently in stealth. We realized that the model of work and how people work and what people do actually is starting to change, and it's changing very quickly. So we invented a new methodology for work where AI and humans are both interacting. So it's AI in the loop with a human in the loop. Currently, we're applying it primarily to software development, and we already show that you can use it to develop software faster, cheaper, better with some of the bigger companies in the world that you might know. So I do think that it also is an agent that can create new opportunities if done right, but it will require a lot of creativity from us, and the transition might be harsh, let's say.
Yeah, we're clearly seeing this. I believe that it's a double-edged sword, but historically, if we've looked at all of the societal changes and the evolution of society, every time certain jobs get disrupted, a lot more gets created. So, for example, the simplest thing, the way I think about it, when electricity just came into the scene, the entire industry of making candles disappeared, but how many more jobs did electricity unleash on the world? And there's been transitions like this. The only big difference right now is that this transition, at least it feels to us, to me, is happening at the speed that we've never experienced before. And whether the society is actually ready for this speed of innovation, the speed of transition, that's, I think, is the big question. And the speed with which AI is evolving, especially in the online and generative space, is causing not just disruption in the way people work, but also in the way we interact with each other and interact with ourselves as a society. So one of the topics that's discussed very frequently here at SRI is making the world safer. And we all know right now that AI is able to create deepfakes, for example, or create solutions to cryptography problems that we've not been able to create before. The question I wanted to ask is, first, how do you think about safety of AI and whether you believe it should or can even be regulated? I'm especially interested from Karen, from your perspective, what are you guys seeing? You are at the forefront, you're working with DARPA and the Defense Department all the time. Is this something that you believe we can control, like especially now with malicious actors who will definitely try to interfere with our upcoming future elections and just with the society as the whole? How do you so there are two questions that are probably somewhat distinct but connected. Can AI be regulated? Can we try to regulate AI? And second, when you see the risks of AI, how do we deal with them?
Yeah, so maybe I'll take on the question about, the risks of AI and controlling them and leave some of the questions for the other panelists. But yeah, that's a really important area. And I think, some people are really afraid of AI right now because they see the hallucinations in ChatGPT, or they see, some of the accidents with the self-driving vehicles, and that they don't look like the way people get into accidents. And so, they're leery of the technology. But I mean, setting aside self-driving vehicles, this technology is just so new that I think to a large extent, the community has been taken by surprise by how well it's worked. And I think the research community has always, cared about being able to control the technology. It's just, there wasn't an expectation we'd have to know how to do it so quickly because we're now seeing the technology deployed all over the place much more rapidly than anyone really would have envisioned. So it's certainly a huge focus in the research community right now to look at mechanisms for understanding better how the technology works and how we can better control that. These systems are really huge black boxes, and by and large, we still don't really understand how they fully operate. But there's a lot of really interesting work going on right now in terms of both getting better transparency on the models and also being able to control how the models are learned, and then also how they operate once they have been learned. So for me, one of the really exciting research directions right now is one that's called neurosymbolic computing, which is really looking at how you can combine knowledge expressed by humans in something like, some people call it good old fashioned AI, but sort of like a rule-based form, and combining that with the magic that you get out of machine learning, where you're getting your models being completely driven by the data over which they are learning. And really pulling those two things together, I think, is a key towards getting systems that are more controllable. So you can define your control rules, you can define your guardrails on what you want these models to look like and how they're going to be able to operate, and have some assurances then that they are going to stay within bounds of those constraints that you're giving to the system.
Do you think it's possible to constrain them?
You can't fully constrain anything. But certainly I think there are lots of interesting ideas out there about how you can get different degrees of assurance with respect to autonomy, for example. So you can get probabilistic guarantees on how things are going to operate. And, if you can get those probabilities up to 99.99, is that good enough? But again, an interesting question, I think, is that because these models don't work the way humans work, that we're always going to see failure conditions that are quite different from how humans fail. So that's going to be an issue, I think, with humans maybe never trusting these things because they think they act in such odd ways, even if statistically they're performing very well and better than humans can do. And we're seeing a little of that with self-driving vehicles right now.
So we are observing this right now when we work in the healthcare system. Thank you. Oh, we found the second mic that works by trial and error. We're seeing the similar question being asked in the healthcare system, where using models like ChatGPT, for example, is very challenging because you don't know if a patient asks a question that is not been properly gated and AI answers that question, that causes liability. And ChatGPT, like, people are trying to jailbreak ChatGPT all the time. And the question becomes, is it even possible to constrain it so that it does not inadvertently gives a medical answer that would put a significant liability on a customer? Because people will do it either by mistake or, in most cases, intentionally. They will try to subvert the system into giving some form of an answer that would cause liability in the healthcare system. And so, do you think it's possible? I think Yaron, you may also have some opinions on that. Is it even possible to constrain the system to not jailbreak? And if it does jailbreak, who's at fault?
I think it's to some extent it's probably possible, and I've actually seen quite a few work that was done also in Medtronic related to potentially protecting medical device in a similar context. I also wanted to touch a little bit one of your previous questions. So the way I personally think about risk related to AI is, in a sense, in 3 different time frames. So like the short term, I think the main risk is potentially related mostly to unemployment or any kind of societal effects that will be very fast due to speed. In the medium term, you can imagine what you mentioned, like malicious actors trying to leverage these systems and create damage at a scale that was impossible before for individuals. And then in the long term, people can sometimes talk about like the alignment problem and potentially AI systems getting out of control by themselves. I personally most concerned about the second problem. I think Karen also touched that point a little bit. And I think that it would be interesting to see how that evolves, because in a sense, it's going to be an arms race, right? Like we'll need to continue to create systems to protect the technologies that we're building from misuse, I guess.
Yeah. Konstantin, would you like to?
I mean, I don't want to, I'll say only, I guess, 3 things. Number one, I recently heard a deep fake of me, and it was super interesting. It was like one of the best things I've heard ever. Number 2, I think, I largely agree that in this problem, right, I don't think that we can formulate a binary answer, right? We can only formulate the expectation value. What is going to be the probability? I mean, putting aside the liability question, which I think is a really tricky one to tackle, but you could still kind of understand, given the probability of outcomes, right? You can ask and answer the question, right? Is your expectation value positive? And I think the second thing that is important is, what's the derivative, right? Is it getting better in time? And to this end, I've been really impressed actually with how the OpenAI products have developed over the last 2 years. They have gotten staggeringly better, and the guardrails on them have gotten, legitimately functional, right? The kind of crazy things that GPT-2 used to say, we just don't see that, aside from, I don't know, one every million generations or something. So I'm pretty optimistic, I would say, in this realm.
Awesome. Maybe to build on this topic, a lot of work that we do at Passio is centered around on-device computation and running AI models on phones, or doing performing AI in a way that actually belongs to the end user. One of the questions I wanted to ask, we know that large language models and generally large models, they definitely do not run on phones. They do run in the cloud, but at the same time, those models learn from everybody on the planet. The way I think about this is kind of been the biggest Robin Hood model in history, where a handful of companies like OpenAI learned from every human on the planet, and then they taught AI to understand everything. And now they monetizing it, but they're also giving it back to the society. So I wanted to ask, what do you think is the first, the implications of this democratization of knowledge, but second, when you are thinking about the privacy in the AI space, do you think it's important for, and will be in the future, to make sure that AIs are personalized and, for example, never shared between users and sit on user devices? Or
yeah, I guess I'll go. Yeah, I got the mic, so that's right. Yeah, I was just nodding along. I thought it was a great. Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I think this is an extraordinarily important question, and something that, you know, we have spent a lot of time engineering at Lucinetic, is a way to never transfer, you know, proprietary information between the LLMs and the user interfaces. It all kind of sits, you know, in a walled off node, and that's hard to do, right? It's hard to do because it, in the end, to some extent, diminishes performance, right? So, you know, it's tough to do, especially as we move towards more prediction. But I guess the point that I'm making is, with this, I don't see a future which is a social media like, you know, race to share everything, right? I think that as you know, we might be, I don't know if we're at the peak now of sharing, you know, of kind of feeding things back into GPT without thinking much about it. I don't know if that's gonna, well, but I certainly in the long term do not see this as a MO, with the exception of sort of trivial, you know, things. So that's where I think it's going.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. And I mean, it's an interesting question to think at more of the corporate level, right? Where corporations certainly want to safeguard their private information. And does that mean they have to build their own LLMs so that they can embed all their information in there? Or will the fine-tuning type techniques be sufficient so that they can get the value of the large language models, but then specialize to their corporate enterprise data repositories? And probably the latter, but I think we're not quite there yet. We're still going to hear lots of funny stories about people sending corporate private information off to ChatGPT, and then it's out in the wild forevermore.
I agree with Konstantin and Karen. I think the only thing I would like to add is, I think in a sense, the privacy question very much depends on the actual application, right? So certain applications have to protect the data of their users in a sense. But you can also imagine a lot of applications where being able to share some of it is actually beneficial. So, and I agree about the rest. Yeah.
So one other topic I wanted to explore a little bit, with this rapid evolution in the LLMs and diffusion, certain things solve, for example, climate change that we were discussing in ways that wasn't possible before. What do you think are the companies that are possible today, or solutions that are possible today that were almost completely impossible just a few years ago? So the world after GPT and diffusion models and before GPT, we're clearly now in the world after. What is possible today that was not possible before?
Okay, I guess I'll start. I think there are a lot of such companies. One specific category of technologies or companies that I'm personally very excited about is the ability to use AI for research and discovery. We've already talked a little bit about climate change, and Konstantin mentioned the point of fusion. There are a lot of still open scientific questions that require actual research in order to be able to address issues related to climate change and the many problems that it entails. And I think there could be really interesting opportunities to create AI in order to design new technologies, invent new stuff, and help us in research, I guess.
Yeah, I of course agree. I think one different direction is the space of generative video. So like I'm in a metal band and we're putting out like a couple albums, and these days if you don't have music videos, they're just like forget it, might as well not even play. And so it used to be the case that you had to pay some guy to make your music video. It was very expensive. Now there are services to just like use stock footage plus whatever footage you provide. And what's crazy is I don't know if it's just like your own interpolation of this, or it really listens to what the song's about, but the videos make sense, right? And so I think that's another kind of the overall creative space is never going to be the same again. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I was going to say the design space is going to be totally transformed by this. I mean, ranging from, I've got a friend who's got a company that does digital advertising, and he just said, now we're doing all our copy with ChatGPT. We're doing a project here at SRI with a large construction company, building a design assistant. So the architect can kind of sketch out the outline for a building, maybe give a few words, a short textual description to kind of describe his vision for it. And the system will now start populating, finishing off the sketch for you to show you some different possible versions of what the building might look like. And it's interesting, as we were wondering at first, will the architects feel threatened by this? And the answer is absolutely not. They love it. They love it. They see it as a creativity enhancer for them. And the tool is never really going to replace them. It's another way for them to really be, pushing their creativity to the max and getting interesting new ideas, leveraging. I mean, again, they're driving the technology. They're giving the initial sketch. They're giving some sort of boundary conditions, I guess, on what they want the final building to look like. But then the AI tool is really helping them just brainstorm some interesting solutions.
Awesome. One of the things I wanted to do, since we is to open for audience, because I know I'm hugging the mic for most of the events, but since we've got a phenomenal audience and phenomenal presenters, if you guys have questions, now is the good time to kind of please go ahead and please introduce yourself. I can actually, we've got, that's perfect. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. I want to, because I know SRI.
I'll repeat them.
And security is broad, and that seems like it's applicable regardless of what technology we're looking at right now. How do you approach privacy versus secrecy as a fundamental concept? Because information, privacy is for a different function. Post function, why we choose privacy or secrecy inherently as a very different function. So how do you approach whether it's generative or fundamental modeling on how should that generatively work? Even the next question, the AGI pathway that we're exploring. But I think that's going to continue to have implications at societal levels of visualization, use cases, along with other things. Because SRI, I really want to understand more than safety, it's really the secrecy versus privacy approach. And then how are you deliver models around it?
Okay, so I guess this one's for me.
For everyone.
Oh, okay. Well, since I got the mic, I guess I'll start. So I mean, privacy and security can mean lots and lots of different things. I think one of the interesting things in privacy with the the large models, both in terms of thinking about the on the image side and the text side as well, is that, you know, they're pulling in information that others have created, and it's interesting to see like how some of that information gets manifest. So there are lawsuits now being prosecuted with respect to reuse of existing content. So that you may have seen that there's a really striking picture I saw in one article from Getty Images, which is suing OpenAI, I guess, where there's a picture of from a soccer match that was taken by Getty Images, and then there's another image that was synthesized. And it's interesting because there's something in the bottom that looks a lot like the Getty Images watermark, but it's different. It's not. It's actually not in, you know, the Roman alphabet, but it looks suspiciously like that. So I think that that's a really interesting question in terms of the data that's being used to learn these models, and whether or not that's respecting copyright law and privacy and all those sorts of things, I think is one really interesting question there. And then, you know, as was said earlier, right, these models are collecting up data and reusing that. They're learning from people interacting with the models. And so there are also some interesting questions there. And maybe people are quite cognizant of the fact that that's happening. So maybe people are potentially giving information to these systems that they would prefer not to be released out into the public domain.
Yeah, I certainly don't have anything to add on SRI itself, but yeah, I think, you know, it's a really excellent question, and it's one that, you know, we have tried to tackle, especially as we deal with live data streams, right? It's really hard, and I think that there's a lot of inspiration one can draw from the way that you know, that nature does it, right? Like how does quantum mechanics forbid certain states from existing? But that's all I'll say.
Yeah, I don't have any direct answers to that question. What I can say is that I think there are two interesting opportunities that are posed by what you're asking. Both of them are from an algorithmic perspective, really. One would be to try and form new algorithms that allow us to train such models like large language models in a way in which the information is more siloed and the output very much depends on subsets of data and not on the entire data set. And secondly, potentially leveraging something along those lines in order to provide information about where the algorithm actually, what in the data set the algorithm actually used to provide an answer to something. So imagine a scenario where a Midjourney-like model actually say, hey, the inspiration for this was this set of images with maybe a certain percentage profile. And then you can potentially even offer new business models, right? Give the copywriters, share the revenue or the profits with the copywriters. But yeah.
All right. Yeah. That's the...
Thank you. Hi, my name is Stefania. Thank you so much for the interesting discussion. I was curious, you mentioned that automation is coming, new jobs are formed, and there's all these challenges and risks and opportunities. How do you imagine the field of education, research, upskilling, continuous learning having to change and adapt, considering how fast this field is changing, like hundreds of papers in AI being published every day, right? And people need to have a certain mental model of how this technology works, even if it functions at different levels of abstractions, in order to be a prompt engineer or a designer that uses like generative AI. Or so how do you imagine the AI literacies field to evolve given the rapid rate at which this technology is changing? Thank you.
I love this question, so I'm gonna steal the microphone. Well, a couple of different things I have to say related to that. So first of all, I do think that large language models as a whole and generative AI creates amazing new opportunities for education, right? Education at scale that is personal, and allows people really to enjoy the state of the art in different fields and actually learn them in a way that is much more available for them. Okay, that's one thing. And then once thought about the point of, you mentioned research and how new knowledge is actually being acquired. So I worked on one project. I co-authored a paper a year or two ago called the Ramanujan machine. Some of you may have heard about it. Basically, it's a set of algorithms that allow machines to run on a computer and discover new mathematics. So the computer runs and discovers new conjectures about number theory. It was published in Nature and annoyed a lot of people and made a lot of other people very happy. But for me, part of the aspiration for this project was actually, can we take computers and algorithms and help them guide us on what we should work on and help inspire future generations of mathematicians, in discovering new mathematics. And we already had, for example, 15-year-old girls around the world, more than one example, that actually proved theorems in mathematics, which I found really inspiring. And I think there are a lot of similar opportunities in other fields as well.
I completely agree. I have I'm kind of invested into this as well. I think that in this field of dynamical systems in particular, right, having a guide to tell you what to look for, huge. As a education more broadly, I can say sort of from my personal experience that there's a great path towards failure, and that great path towards failure is to keep doing exactly what we're doing and not evolve. Right? I was on a train in Tokyo like 2 weeks ago. There was one guy just typing stuff into ChatGPT, copy paste back, and right, it was just this continuous thing, right? And it was and I think that there is a danger in kind of this enslavement of kind of the human and AI in this recursive loop of kind of an idiot talking to a psychopath, right? But I also see kind of the future as doing, in some sense, a lot less and a lot more. And let me expand on what I mean. In the classes that I teach, which are astrophysics classes, right, we are switching to all in person, just like bring a piece of paper and a pencil and do your problems in class, and all the exams are in class, and we're going to have nothing of the stuff that all of the kind of educational kind of tricks that we have developed over the last 2 decades. I'm cutting it off, right? At the same time, for a lot of homework, right, I used to attribute a lot of time for people to sit down and code, right? If they need to do that, right, to solve the problem, like now, that is more or less instant. So we can focus a lot more on kind of the meat of the thinking. So I think it can be a huge tool, and it will inevitably, right? It inevitably, just like, no one does arithmetic without a calculator these days, like it becomes part of what we do. But I think there's also a danger in not recognizing that we need to make tough decisions right now, right?
Yeah, maybe to take a slightly different perspective on the general area that you raised. Much like when the internet became available and we had to teach a whole new generation of people media literacy, that you can't trust something just because you found it on the internet. It's the same issue now with AI. We need a new campaign around AI literacy, so people understand what at a very broad level, how the technology works, and therefore what it can do and what it can't do effectively. I think a lot of people right now just think it's magic and it does everything and it does it perfectly, and it's a computer. There's this whole automation bias concept in the cognitive psychology literature. People trust computers because they think computers are fault-free. They always do the right thing. So I think we need in our educational systems to really be stressing that as part of the core curriculum for our children as they're growing up to learn these things, and of course educating adults as well. in current generations who don't have the luxury of going back to school and learning these things. I'll also mention that I remember reading an article 5 or 6 years ago. China adopted mandatory AI studies back starting in the elementary school level throughout the country. And at the time, I remembered thinking, wow, that's amazing. Like our kids are still doing like very primitive arithmetic in elementary school, and in China, they're studying AI already. So I think we need to up our game on that front. I think just not necessarily that we have to teach everybody to be an AI programmer, but just to have people have a certain literacy around the technology.
All right, we've got one more quick question, and then we'll need to transition to the so we'll do a quick answer, and then we'll transition to our fireside chats.
Great, thank you. Hi, I'm Jeff Klaben. I'm an SRI alum, and I teach cybersecurity and interdisciplinary collaboration at Santa Clara University. In the area of digital twins and modeling the real, the real world through 3D, what do you see beyond like autonomous vehicles as some of the most compelling applications or future applications? Using technologies like LiDAR, for example.
Yes, I can give one example from my work, my previous work at Medtronic. So we took a device, nothing that I'm saying here is not public information, but we took a device that is an insulin pump that can be used for patients, people who are living with diabetes, and actually integrated it with AI algorithms that actually take care of the entire injection process, in a sense, for the patient of insulin. We got lucky enough, the FDA defined that as like a breakthrough project, and it was the first class 3 medical device to be using AI. But we really leveraged the concept of a digital twin in order to take care of people's therapy in a completely personalized manner, in a way that is hands-free. Like people today that are living with type 1 have to manage the disease continuously throughout the day. It's very, very difficult. And I think, at least in my realm of like more of the medical world, I think there are amazing opportunities around that to really personalize, and by mimicking what happens in the human body, potentially replacing organs and trying to help people live healthier.
Yeah, I think in the realm of kind of physics, right? Think, particle accelerators, right? Digital, like it's been forever that people have been writing codes to simulate, the behavior of the beam, blah, blah, blah. But, as we move into the future, right, real digital twins as a design crutch is absolutely game changing.
Yeah, I think a lot of application areas are making use of digital twins. And just one that I'll mention, I mean, I know they're very popular at NASA for doing simulation of things like, potential future space stations or colonies on Mars or that sort of thing, where you can't actually build the real thing. So they need to try to build these digital models of them and hope that they will be good representatives of the twin system that they eventually want to build. So.
Thank you.
Amazing examples. Let's all thank our panelists and thank you for the wonderful questions.